The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked asphalt of Murphy's Gas and Go, somewhere between nowhere and forgotten on Highway 49. The kind of place where the coffee tastes like motor oil, and the only sound is the hum of dying fluorescent lights buzzing like angry wasps trapped in glass. Heat waves shimmered off the pavement, making the distant mountains look like they were dancing. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. 6 Harleys sat parked in perfect formation, chrome gleaming despite the dust that seemed to coat everything in this corner of Arizona. Each bike told a story through its scratches and modifications machines that had seen thousands of miles and countless storms. The Midnight Wolves had been riding since dawn, heading home from a charity run in Flagstaff, where they delivered toys to the children's hospital. Jake, Ironside Martinez, stood at pump 3, his weathered hand steady on the nozzle despite the tremor that sometimes caught him off guard, a souvenir from his third tour in Afghanistan. At 45, he'd seen enough darkness to fill several lifetimes, but something about the open road and the brotherhood of the wolves had pulled him back from edges he'd rather not remember. Behind him, his brothers stretched road-weary muscles and complained good-naturedly about the heat. Tank Williams, a mountain of a man whose gentle voice contradicted his intimidating size, was sharing beef jerky with anyone willing to listen to his stories about his granddaughter's first steps. Slim Peterson, ironically the biggest guy in the group after Tank, argued with Diesel Murphy about the best route home through the reservation. Maya Angel Rodriguez emerged from the station with an armload of energy drinks and chips, her long black hair catching the sunlight beneath her bandana. She was the only woman in the Wolves. But nobody questioned her place there after she'd once talked a suicidal veteran off a bridge, using nothing but her voice and her own story of survival. Preacher Williams, no relation to Tank despite the shared last name, sat on his bike reading a worn paperback, his reading glasses perched on his nose, looking oddly scholarly against his full beard and tattooed arms. The irony of his road name wasn't lost on anyone. He'd been thrown out of seminary school 20 years ago for asking too many hard questions. That's when Jake heard it. A small voice, barely above a whisper, cutting through the desert stillness like a prayer nobody wanted to answer. "Excuse me, mister?" Jake turned, expecting to see another traveler asking for directions. Instead, he found himself looking down at a boy who couldn't have been more than 10 years old. Dirty sneakers with holes in the toes, clothes that had seen better days and looked like they'd been slept in, and eyes that held too much fear for someone so young. His thin shoulders shook despite the heat, and Jake could see tear tracks through the dust on his cheeks. "What is it, son?" Jake's voice automatically softened, the way it always did around kids. Something about children in distress cut straight through all his armor, reached the part of him that had wanted to be a teacher before the world showed him its teeth. The boy glanced around nervously, checking to make sure they were alone, then stepped closer. His next words came out in a rush, barely audible, but clear as a gunshot in the quiet afternoon. "My stepdad, he hurt my sister. Real bad. She's only 7, and she won't stop crying, and Mama won't do nothing because she's scared of him too." The gas nozzle clicked off in Jake's hand, but he barely heard it. The boy's words hung in the air between them like smoke, impossible to ignore or pretend away. Jake knelt down slowly, bringing himself to the child's eye level, his voice careful and gentle. "What's your name, son?" "Tyler." The word came out cracked, like it hurt to say. "Tyler, where's your sister now?" "At home." "With him." Tyler's whole body trembled. "Mama had to go to work at the diner, and she don't know what happened. He said if I tell anybody, he'll hurt Emma even worse. But I seen what you guys did at the children's hospital on the news, and I thought maybe." His voice trailed off. But Jake understood. Sometimes when the system fails, when the people who are supposed to protect you become the threat, you turn to whoever's left standing. Even if they wear leather and ride motorcycles and look like trouble to most folks. Jake's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "How far is your house, Tyler?" "Just up the road. Maybe 2 miles. The blue trailer with the broken fence." Behind them, the other wolves had gone quiet. Tank set down his jerky. Slim stopped mid-sentence about road routes, and Angel's hand had moved instinctively to the phone clipped to her belt. They'd all heard enough to understand what was happening, and each of them was running calculations in their head. "Tyler," Jake said carefully, "I need you to tell me exactly what happened. Can you do that?" The boy nodded, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "This morning, after Mama left for work, Emma spilled some juice on his newspaper. It was an accident. She was just trying to help clean up breakfast. But he grabbed her wrist real hard and twisted it, and she started screaming. Then he hit her. Not like a spanking, like he was trying to hurt her." Tyler's voice broke completely. She flew across the room and hit the wall, and there was blood from her nose, and she just laid there crying. "He told me to clean it up and said if I ever told anybody, he'd make sure both of us regretted it. Then he went to take a shower like nothing happened." Jake felt something cold and familiar settle in his chest. The same feeling he'd gotten overseas when intelligence reports came in about children being used as weapons, about innocents caught in crossfire created by monsters who wore human faces. "That's when I ran," Tyler continued. "I told Emma I'd be right back, that I was going to get help. But what if he hurts her more while I'm gone? What if—" "Hey." Jake placed a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. "You did the right thing. You came to get help, and that's exactly what we're going to do. But I need to know, is your stepdad there now?" "Yeah. He was watching TV when I snuck out. Said he wasn't going nowhere today." Jake stood and turned to his brothers. They were already moving, understanding passing between them in the silent language of people who'd ridden together through hell and back. This wasn't about discussion or debate. This was about a 7-year-old girl who needed them right now. "Angel, call CPS and local law enforcement," Jake said quietly. "Give them the address. Tank and Slim, you're with me. Preacher, you and Diesel stay here with Tyler. Keep him safe." "What about evidence?" Angel asked, her phone already in her hand. "If we go in there without legal authority, there's a 7-year-old bleeding girl who's scared and alone with a man who just proved he'll hurt children." Jake cut her off. "Legal authority can catch up later. Right now, we're all she's got." Tyler grabbed Jake's vest, panic in his eyes. "He's really big, mister. And mean. What if he hurts you too?" Jake looked down at the boy, then at his brothers. Tank cracked his knuckles with the sound of tree branches breaking. Slim checked the heavy chain hanging from his belt. These were men who'd survived wars, prison, and streets that chewed up the weak and spit out the bones. They'd faced down gangs, corrupt cops, and their own demons. One abusive stepdad wasn't going to be a problem. "Tyler," Jake said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "He's not going to hurt anybody ever again. I promise you that." They mounted up with practiced efficiency. Tyler climbed behind Jake, his small arms wrapping around the veteran's waist as the Harley rumbled to life. Angel stayed at the gas station, already on the phone with authorities, giving them everything they needed to know. Preacher and Diesel flanked them as backup, their bikes idling like caged thunder. Up the road, then left at the mailbox that's all been up, Tyler called over the engine noise. The trailer with all the junk cars in the yard. They rode slow, deliberate. This wasn't about speed, it was about presence. About making it clear that the cavalry had arrived and things were about to change. The sound of 6 Harleys rolling through the quiet neighborhood carried like a promise or a threat, depending on which side of right you were standing on. The blue trailer sat at the end of a dirt driveway, exactly like Tyler had described. It was the kind of place that had given up on itself years ago. Broken fence, weeds growing through rusted car parts, windows covered with blankets instead of curtains. A place where bad things could happen behind closed doors and nobody would think to look too hard. Jake killed his engine and helped Tyler down, but kept the boy behind him as they approached the front steps. The other wolves spread out, blocking possible escape routes without making it obvious. Tank positioned himself by what looked like a back door. Slim took the side window where they could hear a television blaring. Through the thin trailer walls came the sound of a man's voice, raised and angry, followed by a small child crying. Jake's vision went red for a moment. He'd heard that sound too many times in overseas villages where warlords ruled through fear, in back alleys where predators hunted the vulnerable. The sound of power being used to break something innocent and small. He knocked on the door. Not politely, hard enough to rattle the frame. What the hell? The voice from inside was slurred, irritated. If that's about the rent, I told you people. The door swung open, revealing a man in his 30s, probably 6'2" and soft around the middle. The kind of size that made him dangerous to children and women, but wouldn't mean much in a fair fight. He had a beer in one hand, and the remote control in the other, like he'd been interrupted during the most important moment of his day. His eyes went wide when he saw Jake standing there. Then he noticed the other bikers positioned around his property, and his face went pale. "Can I help you?" The words came out carefully now, the fake politeness of someone who suddenly realized he might be in trouble. "I'm here about Emma," Jake said simply, "and what you did to her this morning." The man's face cycled through several expressions: confusion, anger, then a calculated calm that was somehow worse than either. "I don't know what you're talking about. Who the hell are you anyway? You can't just come on my property and step outside," Jake said. "It wasn't a request. I don't have to do anything. This is my home, and I want you off my property before I call the cops." Jake smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. "The cops are already on their way. Angel called them about 10 minutes ago. Told them all about a man who likes to hurt little girls. So, you can step outside and have a conversation like a civilized human being, or we can come in and drag you out. Your choice, but either way, this ends now." From inside the trailer came a small voice, weak and scared. "Tyler. Tyler, is that you?" Tyler pushed past Jake before anyone could stop him. Emma, I'm here. I brought help." The man grabbed for Tyler as he rushed past, but Jake's hand shot out faster, clamping down on the stepdad's wrist with enough force to make bones creak. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "Don't," Jake said quietly. "Don't even think about it." Inside the trailer, they could hear Tyler's voice, gentle and soothing. "It's okay, Emma. These are the good guys. They're going to make sure he can't hurt you anymore." Tank appeared in the doorway, having entered through the back. His massive frame filled the space completely as he surveyed the scene inside. When he spoke, his voice carried the controlled fury of a man who'd spent years learning to channel his rage productively. "Kid's got a split lip and bruises on her arms shaped like fingerprints," he reported. "She's scared out of her mind, but she's talking. Says he's been hurting her and Tyler for months, but today was the worst." The stepdad tried to jerk his arm free from Jake's grip. "Those kids are liars. They're always getting into trouble, making up stories. That little girl fell down the stairs is all. Kids are clumsy. Funny thing about kids," Slim said, appearing from around the side of the trailer. "They don't usually lie about the big stuff, especially not when they're bleeding." Sirens could be heard in the distance now, growing closer. The man's eyes darted toward the road, then back to the bikers surrounding him. The mathematics of his situation were becoming clear. He was outnumbered, outmatched, and rapidly running out of options. "Look," he said, trying for reasonable now. "Maybe I lost my temper a little this morning. Kids these days, they don't show proper respect. Sometimes you have to discipline them. Make them understand." Jake's grip tightened until the man gasped. "You call what you did discipline? Throwing a 7-year-old across a room is discipline?" "She needed to learn." "The only person who needs to learn anything here is you," Jake cut him off. "And class is about to start." The first police car pulled into the driveway, followed by an ambulance and a CPS vehicle. Angel must have made it clear this was a priority call. 3 officers got out, hands near their weapons but not drawn, taking in the scene with experienced eyes. "Somebody want to tell me what's going on here?" The lead officer was a woman in her 40s with the weathered look of someone who'd seen too much but hadn't let it break her. Jake released the stepdad's wrist and stepped back, raising his hand slightly to show he wasn't a threat. "Ma'am, my name is Jake Martinez. We received a report from this man's stepson that he physically abused his 7-year-old stepdaughter this morning. The children are inside. The girl needs medical attention." The officer looked at Tyler, who had emerged from the trailer holding Emma's hand. The little girl was indeed bleeding from her nose, and the finger-shaped bruises on her thin arms were clearly visible even from a distance. "Jesus," the officer muttered, then caught herself. She keyed her radio. "Dispatch, I need another ambulance and Detective Morrison out here. We've got injured children." The stepdad straightened up, putting on what he probably thought was a reasonable expression. "Officer, these men threatened me and invaded my property. I want them arrested. Those children fell down some stairs, and these bikers are trying to make it into something it's not." The officer looked at Emma, then at the stepfather, then at the bikers. She clearly dealt with situations like this before. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step away from the children while we sort this out," she told the stepdad. "Tyler, can you come talk to me for a minute?" As Tyler walked over to the police car, Jake knelt down in front of Emma. The little girl looked up at him with eyes that were too old for her face, the same 1,000-yard stare he'd seen in war zones. "Hi, sweetheart," he said softly. "My name's Jake. Tyler came and got me and my friends because he was worried about you. Can you tell me what happened this morning?" Emma glanced nervously at her stepfather, who was now arguing with the officers about his rights and making threats about lawsuits. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "He got mad about the juice. I didn't mean to spill it. He grabbed me and threw me, and my face hit the coffee table." She touched her swollen nose gingerly. "Then he said if I told anybody, he'd make sure I was sorry." Tank, who had knelt down beside Jake, made a sound deep in his throat that might have been a growl. "You don't have to be scared anymore, little one. That man is never going to hurt you again." The EMTs arrived and began checking Emma over, their faces growing dark as they cataloged her injuries. Jake heard one of them mutter something about, "definitely not from a fall," to his partner. The lead police officer finished taking Tyler's statement and walked back over to the group. Her expression had hardened considerably. "Mr. Henderson," she called to the stepdad, "I need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back." "What? This is ridiculous. Those bikers are the ones who should be arrested. They threatened me." "Sir, I have 2 children with injuries consistent with physical abuse, and their stories match completely. You're under arrest for child abuse. You have the right to remain silent." As the handcuffs clicked into place, Henderson's mask finally slipped completely. "This is garbage. Those kids deserve what they get. They're nothing but trouble, just like their worthless mother. I was trying to teach them respect." The officer paused in reading his rights. "Did you just confess to intentionally injuring these children?" Henderson seemed to realize what he'd said, but it was too late. The words hung in the air like smoke, witnessed by 3 police officers, 2 EMTs, a CPS worker, and 6 bikers who'd remember every syllable if they needed to testify later. Jake stood and walked over to where Tyler was watching his stepfather being loaded into the police car. The boy's face was a mixture of relief and worry. "What's going to happen to us now?" Tyler asked. "Mama's going to be so scared when she finds out. We don't have nowhere else to go." Angel, who had arrived just as the arrest was being made, overheard and approached. "Tyler, honey, the nice lady from Child Protective Services is going to make sure you and Emma are safe. And your mama's not going to be in any trouble. She's a victim in this too." The CPS worker, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, nodded. "We'll need to place the children in temporary care while we investigate. But given the clear evidence of abuse and the perpetrator being in custody, this should be resolved quickly. The mother will have every opportunity to regain custody once we ensure the home environment is safe." Jake pulled out his wallet and extracted a business card, Midnight Wolves MC, with the logo of a wolf's head surrounded by flames. He handed it to Tyler. "Listen to me, son. If you or Emma ever need help again, ever, you call that number. Day or night, doesn't matter. One of us will answer, and we'll come. That's a promise." Tyler looked at the card, then up at Jake. "Why did you help us?" You don't even know us. It was a fair question, and Jake thought about it for a moment. How do you explain to a 10-year-old that sometimes the world breaks people so badly that they spend the rest of their lives trying to fix it for someone else? How do you tell a child that every rescue is also a redemption? Because everybody deserves to be safe, Jake said finally. Especially kids, and sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you can't or won't. That's when the rest of us step up. Tank appeared beside them, holding something small and pink. Emma's teddy bear, Jake realized, probably rescued from the chaos inside the trailer. This belonged to anybody? Tank asked gently. Emma's face lit up for the first time all day. She reached for the bear with careful hands, clutching it against her chest like a lifeline. "Thank you," she whispered. "His name is Mr. Buttons." "Well, Mr. Buttons looks like he's been taken good care of." "You," Tank said seriously. "You make sure he keeps doing his job, okay?" The ambulance was preparing to transport Emma to the hospital for a full examination, with Tyler accompanying her. The CPS worker would meet them there and begin the process of finding temporary placement. It would be bureaucratic and complicated, but it would be safe. As the emergency vehicles prepared to leave, the lead police officer approached Jake. "Mr. Martinez, I need to ask, how exactly did you become involved in this situation?" Jake gestured toward Tyler, who was helping Emma into the ambulance. "Boy came to us at the gas station, said his sister was being hurt. We couldn't just walk away from that." The officer studied him. "You know, if you'd gone in there and things had escalated, if that man had been armed, or if someone had gotten hurt, this could have gone very differently." Maybe, Jake acknowledged, but that little girl couldn't wait for the system to move at its own pace. Sometimes you have to choose between doing what's legal and doing what's right. And if I asked you to promise me you'd let law enforcement handle situations like this in the future? Jake met her eyes steadily. "I tell you that I hope there never are situations like this in the future. But if there are, I'll do whatever it takes to protect innocent children. Every time." The officer nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, what you did today probably saved that little girl from worse. Just try to call us sooner next time." As the convoy of official vehicles pulled away, the midnight wolves found themselves alone in the sudden quiet of the trailer park. Neighbors who had been watching from behind curtains began to emerge, talking in low voices about what they'd witnessed. "Think they knew?" Slim asked, nodding toward the other trailers. "About what was happening?" Angel shrugged. "Probably suspected. But suspecting and acting are two different things. People mind their own business until somebody forces them to care. We force them to care today," Preacher observed. "Question is, what happens tomorrow? What happens to the next kid?" It was the eternal question, the one that kept Jake awake some nights. You save who you can, when you can, but the machine that creates victims keeps running. The system that fails children keeps failing them. The people who should protect, but don't keep not protecting. "Tomorrow, we go home," Jake said. "We go back to our lives, to fixing bikes and paying bills and pretending the world makes sense. But we keep that card handy, and we answer the phone when it rings. And maybe, if we're lucky, there's a little less darkness in the world than there was this morning." Tank was cleaning his hands with a bandana, trying to get the smell of fear and violence off them. "You know what gets me? How scared that boy was to tell anybody. 10 years old, and he already knows the adults in his life can't be trusted to protect him. But he still tried," Angel pointed out. "He was scared out of his mind, but he still ran 2 miles to get help for his sister. That's courage. That's love," Jake corrected. "That's what people do when they love someone more than they're afraid for themselves." They rode back to the gas station in contemplative silence, each man lost in his own thoughts. The adrenaline was wearing off now, leaving behind the hollow feeling that always followed situations like this. They'd done the right thing, but it never felt like enough. At Murphy's Gas and Go, they topped off their tanks and bought cold drinks, preparing for the final stretch home to Phoenix. The attendant, a weathered man in his 60s, watched them with curious eyes. "Y'all are the ones went up to the Henderson place, aren't you?" he asked as Jake paid for his Coke. "Might be," Jake replied carefully. The man nodded slowly. Been waiting years for somebody to do something about that situation. That man's been trouble since he moved in with Martha and those kids. But folks around here, we mind our own business, you know? Don't get involved. Sometimes somebody has to get involved, Jake said. I suppose they do, the attendant agreed. Those kids got any other family? Anywhere safe to go? CPS is handling it. They'll be taken care of. The man rang up the purchase and handed Jake his change. Well, I appreciate what you boys did today. Takes guts to stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. As they prepared to leave, Jake's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. This is Tyler. Emma is okay. Doctors say she'll heal fine. They found us a nice foster family for now. Thank you for keeping your promise. Jake showed the message to the others. Angel smiled, the first real smile any of them had managed all day. Kid already figuring out how to stay connected, she said. Smart boy, brave boy. Tank corrected. Both of them. They're going to be okay. Yeah. Jake agreed, starting his bike. They are. The midnight wolves pulled out of the gas station as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. Behind them, they left a small town that was already talking about what they'd witnessed, neighbors who were suddenly paying attention to the sounds coming from their neighbors' homes. They rode toward Phoenix and their regular lives, but Jake knew they'd all be different now. They'd been reminded why they wore the patches, why they called each other brother, why they answered when someone needed them. Because in a world that often fails to protect its most vulnerable, sometimes the answer comes rumbling down the highway on two wheels, wearing leather and carrying scars, ready to stand between the darkness and the light. 3 miles down the road, Jake's phone buzzed again. Another message from Tyler. Mr. Buttons says thank you too. Jake smiled and tucked the phone away. Some promises, he thought, were worth keeping forever. The thunder of 6 Harleys echoed across the desert, carrying men who'd learned that heroism wasn't about glory or recognition. It was about showing up when someone needed you, standing up when everyone else stood by, and making sure that innocence had someone to call when the monsters came calling. Behind them, in a hospital room in a small Arizona town, a 7-year-old girl slept safely for the first time in months, clutching a pink teddy bear named Mr. Buttons. And somewhere in a foster home across town, her brother Tyler kept a business card in his pocket, a promise that if the darkness ever came looking again, the thunder would return. Because that's what family does. And today, for 2 scared children who needed them most, the midnight wolves had become exactly that family. The road stretched endlessly ahead, and they rode it together, brothers in leather and steel, guardians of those who had no other guardian, keepers of promises that mattered more than life itself. The thunder faded into the desert silence, but the promise remained. Call, and we will come. If this story reminded you that courage comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most unlikely heroes are the ones who show up when everyone else looks away, please share it with someone who needs to remember that there are still good people fighting the good fight. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.